Nezuko.
What is up everyone, this is Keka the Otaku and welcome to the review of Sword Art Online Season 2. I was really undecisive whether or not I should make the second season review as my second video of the series right after the first one. Since I'm not really the type of dude that gives out good scores about SAO, even though I've recently rewatched it and still had a fun time. If you have not watched my video on the first season of SAO, please do. Before I continue, I would like to point out that this video contains spoilers. It is really hard to make a spoiler-free review, considering the events of the first season leading to the second one. So yeah, if you have not watched the second season, please leave now. Anyways, as most of you may know, I've been watching SAO with my dear friend, and it was fun to see your reaction to the second video. The second season starts off with Kirito and his friends jumping back to their normal lives. Kirito and Asuna living their romance dream, the other girls crying out of jealousy for not being in Asuna's place, and the dudes just overall doing their normal stuff. Until one day when the Japanese government contacts Kirito about a certain MMO shooter game called Gun Gale Online, where a certain shady personality by the name of Death Gun is able to kill avatars in-game that somehow leads to the real person's death. A heart attack. They really like to go around and kill people through heart attacks in this series, am I right? And so he must jump into the game and investigate. Along the way, he meets this GGO female veteran player called Shino. Shino? Sino? Shino? I think it's Shino. Yeah. Where he teams up with in the main GGO tournament so that he can find the criminal's identity and hopefully stop him. Now, don't get me wrong, the intention of deriving from the first season's story structure is there. The plot seems pretty solid and straightforward, the mystery behind the antagonist's way of killing and his shady intentions sparked a lot of interest. Shino looking really badass and oozing a strong and unique personality from the get-go. Though, I was hopeful she wouldn't fall into Kirito's harem brigade. Spoilers, she does of course. The atmosphere and tone becoming even more serious, just like in the first few episodes of the first season. Until, Kirito jumps into the game. For some goddamn reason, Kirito is given a feminine avatar? But why? Well, because obviously it is a plot factor that needs to be implemented, so that Shino and Kirito can be connected to the rest of the story and develop their bond from there, but still, it felt really cringy in my opinion, as it made really confusing for me as to which kind of atmosphere and tone the story was trying to follow. Is it serious or is it a fun and relaxing tone? Come on, just make up your mind. Like I said before, Shino's introduction is a positive point to this arc. She's this strong-willed young lady, which goes really well with her characterization for being an experienced sniper player in the game, even though she doesn't have a god tier status, like Kirito. Not only that, but her personality fits really well in the story. We are in a shooter MMO game where most players are basically pros, therefore having Shino being serious most of the time, it gives a new fresh look to the series. Plus her background story had some dramatic effect to the whole thing, in which I'll talk about in a few minutes. Even though I like her character, it felt really disappointing once we realized she was simply a supporting character and not the main piece of the arc. She's in the center of the cover. Why do you do this, Mr. Reki? Why? Moving on. So we get to understand a little bit better about the connection that the arc is trying to show between Kirito and Death Gun. It all began back in the first season, where Kirito fought some of the members from Laughing Coffin, this guild that was notorious for being the PKing group. And yeah, Kirito killed one of them, and so, Death Gun being one of the surviving members of this guild, he recognizes Kirito because of his in-game nickname, and basically wants to slap his ass. So basically the story tries to emphasize this event a lot throughout the entire arc. They want to somehow create this dramatic effect of killing people and forcefully establish some sort of connection between Kirito and Shino's personal background. However, they failed tremendously simply because the story is trying to remind us of a certain event that was never shown or mentioned in the first season. Not only that, but the attempt in creating this tragic effect about killing someone back in the first season, as if it was something new for Kirito, made no sense at all. Like other players, Kirito had to kill a lot of people in the SAO game because he had to, if he wanted to keep on living, even if in self-defense. I mean, it's not something new for him. As a result, we see a Kirito that simply has personality issues because the story tries to define him as someone who's traumatized from the whole experience he lived in the past. However, again, they really f***ed it up because he jumps really quickly from being a really calm and focused person to be an arrogant douchebag, then become funny, then be an asshole again, then be emotionally unstable all of a sudden, and I mean all of this in a blink of an eye. Talking about Shino's background, even though she looks serious and collected most of the times, she has this trauma from her childhood, where she was forced to kill a robber when she and her mother were in the post office one day. In the midst of the robbing attempt, when the criminal was threatening her mother, she's able to wrest the pistol and kill the guy. Ever since that day, she has PTSD about guns, and whenever she picks one, she freaks out. Except in the game. She somehow is able to play this deep virtual game and able to pull all kinds of stunts, handling weapons. I do understand that it is some sort of exposure therapy for her, to try and face her fears and to surpass her traumatic childhood episode, which makes me like her personality even more. Nonetheless, I have to say I find it a bit contradictory for her being totally chilled with a sniper rifle, but handling one in real life proves to be impossible for her. Nonetheless, speaking of feats, it baffles me how inconsistent Kirito keeps being when it comes to pulling those impossible deflects with his weapon. To start off, in a shooter game, this guy decides to go with a lightsaber to fight off pro players that have years of experience, and Kirito just comes into the GGO tournament deflecting bullets using his lightsaber like never before, including cutting through a sniper rifle bullet when fighting against Shino. I mean, come on, it doesn't make sense at all. We all know his experience with swords, but this is simply outrageous because it doesn't make any sense. The rest of the arc becomes this weird ass bull show where Kirito fights his way to the top, where Shino becomes more and more fond of Kirito's abilities. Later on, we find out that Death Gun is actually working with someone, making it clear that this second criminal is pulling the strings on the outside world, killing people on the spot the moment Death Gun uses his weapon in-game. And yeah, the arc finishes off with Shinkawa, who's Shino's best friend, or was Shino's best friend, attempting to kill her for some weird obsessive reason, because he's the brother of Death Gun and they simply want to terrorize VR MMO players. No, seriously, the dude is just obsessed with Sinnoh and he wants to keep her forever. Yeah. And of course, Kirito living nearby for some lucky reason, he gets there in time to save her. Nevertheless, I do have to say this before I have a heart attack. And that is the Phantom Bullet arc is probably one of the worst in the SAO franchise in my opinion. Equally as bad, if not worse, than the Fairy Dance arc. A lot of stuff didn't make sense, from the plot all the way to the characters behaving really weirdly just to convey a point that didn't work out in the end. Now, talking about the second arc, Mother's Rosario was in my opinion one of the best arcs so far in the franchise. And I'm not talking about the mini story in the search of the Excalibur sword. That was okay, but a very filler story per se. This time around, Asuna is the main protagonist, and thank God for that. We know that she has taken many roles in the past, being a badass in the beginning, then becoming Kirito's cheerleader, and then the princess locked up in the castle that needs to be saved. Finally, now she's an important piece to the story. We got to see more about her personality and how her character development was a necessity for the franchise. Not only Asuna's importance, but also the introduction of the other protagonists to the whole story arc. Kono Yuki. To make you a brief summary, the story happens mainly in Alfheim Online, where a new character by the name of Zekken is challenging players in exchange for an 11-hit combo sword skill if they win. Of course, this Zekken is none other than Yuki, the female character I just mentioned. Asuna decides to take her on, but the duel ends quickly with Yuki's victory. She then asks Asuna to join her and her friends to fight the boss from the 27th floor, as it is literally their dying wish as a guild to be in the Hall of Fame of the game. Yes, because in reality, Yuki has a terminal illness along with most of her friends, and they don't have much time together. Why was this such an amazing arc? Well, from the emotional roller coaster ride about Yuki's story to Asuna's personal development, this arc was an amazing journey. Even though it had a tragic and emotional end, Yuki as a character has shown a lot of promise. Even though she was terminally ill, she behaved like a strong young woman that wasn't afraid of dying. She was focused on her dream, becoming best friends with Asuna and develop a great friendship bond. Did I mention that Yuki was so badass that she was able to beat the almighty god Kirito? I mean, it is so amazing how her characterization was set in place. We would never realize she was ill until the very moment she collapsed. Even though Yuki had lost her sister from an illness in the past, we could see that despite all those endeavors, she was really happy to have spent those moments, even if it was for a week or so, with Asuna and the rest of her friends. And we could see the same from Asuna. The bond that they created was so awesome that with the obvious ending that we were expecting, it was, too hard to watch. Without dragging it too much, all I have to say is that it pains me so much to even remember the ending scene for Yuki. It was very sad and emotional, and I think Mother Rosario's arc was the savior for this season's mess. On a more animation and audio side of things, the design was pretty solid. Most of the fighting scenes were pretty smooth, with good animation, similar to the first season. The soundtracks from the first season made a comeback with slight tweaks, and also some new added soundtracks for the second season. Of course, this is Yuki Katsura we're talking about. Her previous works on other anime were proof of great quality, like Fate Zero or the Madoka series. And so she did deliver once more in this second season. Even though the songs from the first season came back, didn't bother me one bit, as I'm a personal fan of those. Even the sound effects were very well made, even for a weekly TV series. Regardless, I believe that this season was poorly conceived, especially with the main arc. I swear, if Mother Rosario was in the main story, the season would have been saved, and the fairy dance would have taken the pole for the worst arc of the franchise. And with this, the final verdict for Sword Art Online Season 2 will be a score of 3 out of 10. I can assure the worst grading is done. The third season was good, okay? It was good. But I'll leave it for another video. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed my content, subscribe to my channel and like the video. I'll be continuing to post all sorts of content related to anime on the channel, as well as something a bit different that I have been working on for the past few weeks. Don't forget to watch your daily dose of anime, because it's good for your brain and heart. Take care, and I'll see ya on the next video.